The Canadian women's national team players appeared in court on Thursday as they continue their fight for equity pay. So, let's talk about it. If you're unaware of the current ongoings, the Canadian women's national team is fighting with their federation for pay equity and transparency of pay. The demands are pretty simple and clear. The Olympic champions are asking for the same financial support and commitment ahead of the Summer's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand as the men's got before their Qatar adventure last year. Both teams want Canada Soccer to ultimately be very transparent with their financial dealings and budget cuts. At the start of the year, the players were informed that they were getting budget cuts, which is an absolutely ridiculous thing to say and announce in a World Cup year. The women's national team have basically survived on nothing in the past few years, despite their recent success. In response to this, the players wanted to strike. However, the federation threatened to sue them if they went ahead and striked. Ultimately, they had to participate in the She Believes Cup back in February, and this is currently where we find ourselves in this situation. About a week ago, the president at the time of Canada Soccer, Nick Bontis, agreed on mutual terms to separate and leave Canada Soccer from his position. After plenty of the players, both on the men's and the women's national team, voiced their opinions, being very unhappy with what Nick Bontis is currently doing with the federation. A few days after that, Charmaine Cooks, who was the VP under Nick, is now the president. Charmaine Cooks is an individual who has been on the board for over a decade and has steadily climbed her way up the board. In other words, this is an internal hire that has been involved in the current shit show and just the current mess that's going on in the Canadian Soccer Federation. And in no means this is new blood or new thoughts or new ideas that's being introduced and put forward. Players were in fact asked about Crooks and how they feel about the new management and if they trust the leadership. Christine Sinclair, who is arguably the face of Canadian soccer, responded by saying that Crooks has not actually reached out to any of the players yet and has not contacted them or has not reached out to say any of her ideas or what her commitments are. All of the players agreed and spoke on how for as long as Charmaine Cooks has been on the board and on the federation, they have not seen any showings that she is actually there to fight for the women's national team and to get them what they deserve. And ultimately, they do not believe in the new leadership, which is a completely understandable and I think very popular thought that a lot of the fans are currently feeling. Not only do I push my opinion again that the entire board needs to have a complete overhaul. Internal hires that have been involved in the current ongoings for the past 10 or so years are not going to change anything. Specifically, a VP over the last few years who's been working directly under Nick Bontis and has been working directly under these budget cuts that have been announced for the women's national team. Moving them up into that president spot is really not so much of a change. In fact, it's the same exact problem that's probably even being exploited even more now. The first thing that Crooks did when she got into the chair was release a statement hours before the players appeared in court discussing the deal and the bargaining agreements and discussions that them and the players have had. One, it was promised that that discussion was going to stay private until after the court was going to be resolved. Two, we later found out after Janine Beckie spoke in court saying that some of the stuff that was written in the statement was actually not communicated to the players before. So when they were reading the statement, some of that stuff was new to them, just as new as it was to us people. To have that statement come out hours before the players appeared in court is disgraceful. It's a move. You're trying to rattle the players. You're trying to scare them. You're trying to send a message. And ultimately is just terrible timing. Before the players even get to equal pay, before the players even get to equity, before we even get to all of the demands that the players are asking for, one huge puzzle that needs to be solved, and this has been, again, consistently brought up by the players, is transparency. Janine Beckie, Christine Sinclair, Quinn, and Sophie Schmidt don't know what money is coming into the federation, how it's coming in, where it's coming in, and where is it being pumped out. And this is a crucial point that Janine Beckie was talking about, is for them as players who are trying to bargain and present a deal, they want to make sure that that deal is not only fair for them, the players and the team, but they also want to make sure that that deal is fair for the board and for the federation and what for the federation can handle. But when you're not being transparent and when the players have no idea what the actual financial situation is, then how are you going to be able to put a fair deal on the table? You simply won't. That trust has been broken with the association multiple times. It has been broken and breached on various occasions. And the number one thing that they've asked for is transparency. And I'm still struggling to grasp my head around why is it so hard to be transparent with your players. You don't have to release that information to the public if you are that strict with it. But for the players to not be aware of what is happening in that money pool It is simply absurd. And in fact, when you come out and say that the players are asking for too much, well, how the hell are the players supposed to know that they're asking for too much when they don't know what money you're working with? Quinn spoke about this very eloquently in court, and that this current situation that they're currently dealing with is not about, we want to get our World Cup funds, we want to make sure we're okay for the Olympics next year. It's about present and future. When the youth teams are getting one singular camp a year, I mean, how on earth do you expect a senior team to pump out talent and pump out potential and pump out trophies? It's absurd. You can't. You're cutting funds for the youth system. You're cutting funds for the senior system. Your system is drained. Your system is broken. It's going to struggle. Sophie Schmidt even said that the system of developing players is broken and women are making it to the national team by chance, not by design. Canada's already quite behind on the fact that we don't have a league, even though that is in the works, and the individuals that are behind the project are very trusted individuals, and there's a ton of potential in the project that's being put together. But for the Canada soccer side, when you see your U17 and U20s getting knocked out in the group stages in the World Cup, why would you be surprised? How do you even have the audacity to come up and say our U17s crashed out early and surprisingly in the World Cup? When you're cutting out funds for their facilities, for their equipment, for their staff, for everything that would work together to have a successful team. When you cut all these funds, I mean, what do you expect more than a crash out in a group stages? And Janine Beckie, who was at Manchester City, she spent a lot of time in the WSL. She was around a lot of Lionesses players, and so she's been in an environment where she saw what a good youth system results in. The Lionesses were not pumping in money and investing and having plans for that youth. UNC Jess Park taking the place of Nikita Paris, let's say. The young names are pushing out these old names because there's a good designed, invested in system. What we're seeing right now is the result of a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. This isn't happening overnight. This is not an investment plan that they came out with 2 months ago. This is the result of listening to your players. This is the result of giving the players the right facilities. This is the result of backing up your players. This is the result of giving adequate staff. And ultimately, this is the result of believing in why you want to invest in your women's national team. You're not treating them as an afterthought. This is exactly what both Sinclair and Beckie said they felt about the federation, is that they felt like they were being treated as an afterthought, which quite honestly is a very, very nice way of describing how the federation has been treating them. Had they not been in court, that description could have sounded a lot worse than just an afterthought. Canada has been very lucky in producing some of this talent. We see Jessie Fleming, Julia Grosso, currently Jade Rivera. These names got incredibly lucky into making it into the senior squad, and then they got developed over in the United States. But you're talking about the amount of players that I can count on both my hands. Where is that talent pool going? Where are the rest of the players going? Where are the teammates of Jessie Fleming? Where are the players that grew up with Jessie Fleming? I mean, it's a tiny, tiny funnel that we're getting to see 2 or 3 players in a generation come out. This is damaging. And we may not be seeing the results currently right now because we're talking about the Olympic champions, but in a 5-year time, you could be talking about Canada being way, way behind than what the current conversation is. That will be the case if nothing happens, obviously. It's quite inspirational, I think, for many that these players are putting on the fight of their life. I mean, they are quite literally in some ways jeopardizing the World Cup to fight against a federation that has continuously underfunded them, disappointed them, and not backed them up one single time. Current president needs to get in touch with the players as soon as possible. To not have talked to any of the individuals is seriously, seriously wrong. That trust needs to be gained. You need to have a good communication relationship, and after all, you need to have transparency. I think it's absolutely absurd that in this day and age, in 2023, we're talking about federations needing to be transparent with their own players. Why are these players asking for transparency? Because they're fighting for equity. They're fighting to meet basic demand. They're fighting to get some of the bare minimum support that they have been lacking for the last decade or so. Canada Soccer and the board of the higher-ups not only have some very serious questions to answer, but they have some serious work to get to, and very quickly. And if that requires an overhaul, so be it. Clearly, the federation has shown to crumble slightly under the pressure that the players are putting on, which is great. But the more they stretch it, the more they harm the players, and the more they harm the future of Canadian soccer. Whichever name needs to step in, they need to be somebody who's seriously invested in the Canadian women's national team. They need to trust the process. They need to see a vision. They need to have a plan for the youth. These finances cannot be hidden under the table. The finances need to be out there for the players. The finances need to be present when the bargaining deals are being discussed. And I can't help but say that this incredibly angers me, and it's just so sad to see players who have brought gold to this country. Christine Sinclair, I mean, the amount of disrespect that incredible legend has received from Canada Soccer is just, it is wild. Nick Bontis, the ex-president, and some of the other higher-ups are going to be in court testifying on March 20th. It will be interesting to see how they answer these questions, and most importantly, the question that we need to answer is, why is there no transparency? What is it that's holding them back to share that financial situation with the player? And again, we could be asking for a lot more, and I think we do deserve to ask for a lot more, but it's important to get these basics covered. We're not asking for these numbers to be released to the public. We're not asking for better media coverage. We're not asking for better broadcasting. We're not asking for some of these basic things that other fans would be asking for. And God forbid we ask them to take a look at Project 8 and what Diana Matheson's putting together. And God forbid we ask them to invest in the league that's coming to Canada. All these questions need to be answered, and all these obvious issues need to get to. But at first, right now, we need to take care of the women's national team, because without a women's national team, everything else fails. Share your thoughts, let me know, and to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. I will see you later.